Valerie and I came from middle of the Oklahoma Panhandle and a little town called Hooker, high school sweethearts, and thought we was going to spend our lives there, and it didn't turn out to be so. We things happened with our company, and we got an opportunity to move to Kimmer, Wyoming, with the company. So in 2002, we moved to Wyoming, and it was a great adventure for us, a new adventure, and we were kind of nervous and scared. Never been away from home, and all of our kids and families was around, and it was different for us. And whenever we got to Wyoming, it didn't take us very long to realize that things were different in Wyoming than they were in Oklahoma. One thing that was really different was the amount of sheep that we saw. It seemed like there were just sheep everywhere. At that time, in 2002, there was over 500,000 sheep in the state of Wyoming, according to the Wool Growers Association. But now the sheep is down to 300,000. So the population of sheep is declining a little bit in Wyoming. But at one time, my office was 13 miles from town, and up on the hillside, and there were these herdsmen that was driving this flock of sheep. And I'm not talking, we tend to think as a flock of sheep in the Bible times as a small flock, but in Wyoming there are a lot in the flock. And these herdsmen would drive all these sheep past my office, across the road, and seemed to be always in the way, and they was driving with horses. They weren't shepherds, they were herdsmen. They was driving the sheep to greener pastures. Whenever they got to their destination, then the shepherds would take care of them. But these herdsmen would drive these sheep, and they would drive them so fast that every once in a while one of the sheep would drop off. And the herdsman didn't pay them any attention. They was in a hurry to get those sheep up the mountain. So they just kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing. And they would leave some of them behind. One particular instance, they pushed the sheep on through and they were gone. You couldn't see anymore, but there was one ewe that was stuck down there in the bog. If it wasn't for my employees, it would have died. They got that sheep out of the mud, and it wintered there with us. It stayed there with us, and it was there all winter, all by itself. And whenever the time came to drive the sheep back down or back up the mountain, well, the next herd came through, and the ewe was there, and they picked it up and up off the mountain that they went. So it was kind of an eye-opener for us. In the Bible, sheep are mentioned more than any other animal, over 400 times. In Genesis 4, verse 2, it said, "Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain a tiller of the ground." We as children of God are referred to as God's sheep. Like a shepherd, Jesus is concerned about our well-being. He wants to take care of his sheep because the shepherd loves his sheep. Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd." He didn't call himself King Jesus. He called himself a shepherd, a servant, a provider, a caretaker, a watchman. And he calls us, his people, the sheep of his pasture. In Psalms 100, verse 3, it says, "Know that the Lord, he is God. He is who made us. And not we ourselves. We are his sheep, the sheep of his pasture." In Jeremiah 50, verse 6, it says, "My people have been lost sheep. Matthew 9:36 said, "But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep, having no shepherd." People in Bible times knew a lot about sheep, so we were a good subject to use in Jesus' teaching and for him to compare us to. But that's not always entirely true. For you see, sheep aren't very smart. If there's a hole in the fence, they might try to get through that hole in the fence, and they just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, expecting different results. Sometimes we as people do the very same thing. Sheep are nearsighted. They're easily frightened. They're stubborn. Their only defense is to run. We too are the same way. Sometimes we have problems and we just want to try to run away from them without confronting them and solving them. Sheep are followers. If one sheep moves, the other ones are about probably going to follow. This is especially true in Turkey when a sheep went over the cliff. The next sheep saw it and it went over the cliff. And the next one, and the next one. 1,500 sheep went over that cliff following that lead sheep. Sometimes we are that same way. We follow without thinking. Even though somebody does wrong, we have a tendency to follow. Sheep have no homing instincts. A dog or a cat can find its way home, but a lost sheep is a lost sheep. You have to go find them if they wander off. So Jesus knows us pretty well. We are helpless without a shepherd. Remember when I said the sheep, the herdsmen were moving the sheep so fast they were actually kicking up dirt, and that's all too often that's our problem today. The world is moving at such a fast pace. We get so involved in it, we're busy kicking up dirt. We're always on the go. We're always on the run. We use the expression often, we just don't have time to do this. We don't have time to do that. That in order for a shepherd to know his sheep, he has to spend time with them. You have to be around them. You have to live with them. You have to talk with them. That leads us to the chapter 15 in the book of Luke. In the 15th chapter of Luke, the first two verses go. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." See, here the Pharisees are ticked off. These so-called religious Pharisees are upset with Jesus. It's the unwritten law of the Pharisees says you do not eat with sinners, tax collectors. You don't do it. But here Jesus was doing that. He welcomed the sinners. The sinners didn't go to the Pharisees. They went straight to Jesus. Because they knew that Jesus actually loved them and cared for them and was concerned for them, not these Pharisees. As we go on reading in this parable, first Jesus was kind of guilty by association here. Since he was sinners, he was kind of guilty by association. As we go on to verse 3, it said, Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you have 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. I tell you, in that same way, there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over the 99 righteous persons who did not need to repent. You see, in this metaphor, this parable, it talks about the lost sheep. I can't think of a more terrible word than the word lost. You see, the sheep, it didn't wander off intentionally. The sheep just started nibbling. And it went here and there, and pretty soon it looked around and there wasn't any other sheep. There wasn't any other shepherds. It didn't intend to get lost. It just got further and further away. It looked up and it was confused. It didn't know where to go. It didn't even know how it got there. It's one thing to do something intentionally. But there are people today that have just wandered off. They're lost. So we see in the story where the shepherd goes and looks for the sheep, and he finds the sheep. But he's not mad at the sheep. He doesn't chastise the sheep in any way. He doesn't kick the sheep, call it a bunch of names. What does he do? He rejoices. I have found my lost sheep. And we see here in the parable that he puts it on his shoulders and he takes it back home. He takes it back to the fold. But in order to get the sheep on his shoulders, he has to lift it up. That's exactly what Jesus does for us. He lifts us up. He rejoices. He puts us on his shoulders and he takes us home. The Bible calls a sheep not to devalue us, but to remind us that we can't get back home without the shepherd. How much time do we try to spend bringing others to Christ? How are we doing it? The reason we grow as Christians today is so we can help those who need help. We can help those that are lost. How about our friends, our moms, our dads? How about our children? There's an unknown author that put this to pen. 'Twas a sheep, not a lamb, that strayed away in the parable that Jesus told. A grown-up sheep that had gone astray from the 99 in the fold. Out on the hillside, out in the cold, 'twas a sheep the good shepherd sought. And back to the flock, safe into the fold, 'twas a sheep the good shepherd brought. And why for the sheep should we earnestly long and earnestly hope and pray? Because there is danger if they go wrong, that they will lead their lambs astray. For the lambs will follow the sheep, you know, wherever the sheep may stray. When the sheep go wrong, it will not be long till the lambs are as wrong as they. And so with the sheep, we earnestly plead for the sake of the lambs today. If the sheep are lost, what a terrible cost the lambs will have to pay. Also in Wyoming, we noticed that among all these sheep, there were several black sheep. Black sheep wool cannot be dyed. But in Wyoming, you can only have so many sheep on so much grass, and it's ruled by the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. They keep track of all that. They don't want to overgraze these mountainsides. So the sheep, or the shepherds, they have to put one black sheep for every 100 white sheep. So that way, when they're up on the hillside, it's almost impossible for the BLM people to count each sheep. So they just count the black sheep, and they have an approximate number of how many sheep that you have. So even if you're the black sheep of your family this morning, you are valuable. You are needed. You have a purpose. To many of us, sheep look alike, and we can't tell them one from another. Philip Keller explains in his book, if you look closely, you'll notice that each sheep has peculiar traits and markings. One may walk a little sideways. One may have bowed feet. One may be missing a patch of wool. One has a small black mark under his eye. These are not just sheep to shepherds. This is limpy and blacky and nosy and patches and so on and so on. The shepherd names his sheep, and he knows the sheep by name. But the only way a shepherd can get to know his sheep is to live with them and come close to them. And that's exactly what Jesus has done for us. He has come from heaven to earth to live with us as sheep. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, knows our peculiar traits, our markings, and yes, he even knows us by name. In sheep country, there's not a whole lot of trees, there's not a whole lot of wood. So the shepherds would build walls made for pens out of rocks. They would stack rocks and stack rocks. But the only opening was about that wide, just enough for a sheep to get through, one at a time. He would lead the sheep into the pen, and then he would lay down across that opening to protect them from the wolves outside. If we turn over to John 10, John 10, verses starting in verse 3. It tells us here, it says, the watchman opens a gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. So Jesus says it again. I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever come before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep, so when he sees a wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as a father knows. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. And there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. This morning in closing, there's a story of two men who were called in a large classroom to recite the 23rd Psalm. One was trained in speech and drama, and he got up and he delivered the psalm in a powerful way. When he had finished, the audience cheered and shouted for an encore. Then he sat down, and the next man got up and repented. Said the same song. Lost for words. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And he went on with the song. When he got through with it, there was dead silence. Nobody said anything. They were in deep devotion and prayer. The first man then got up and he said, I want to tell you the difference between my friend and I. He said, I know the psalm, but my friend here, he knows the shepherd. So this morning, how well do we know the shepherd? We always have an invitation at the end of a lesson. If you have any concerns or need any help in any way, we ask that you be known that, let that be known now, and we'll stand and sing a song of invitation.